Hi, this is Cheryl Gallant, your Conservative Member of Parliament for the Common Sense riding of Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke. The Liberals are cutting the defence budget. They claim the cuts would only be for consultants and travel, but the truth has been exposed. What has been cut is training for soldiers and pilots. What has not been cut is spending on diversity and equity consultants. The Defense Department has already spent $250,000 in the first 3 months of this year on equity consultants. Since the Liberals were elected, they have taken over $9 million from the defense budget to waste on far-left re-education camps. But that doesn't tell the whole story. Between 2015 and 2021, there were 37 equity-related contracts. Between 2022 and 2023, the Liberals issued 65 equity-related contracts. The Liberals are ramping up the radical woke agenda in the military. Their goal is to drive people out of the military so they can spend less on it. They want to let the equipment and training degrade so that no future government can deploy the Canadian Armed Forces, either at home or overseas. The Liberals just want a climate corps they can dispatch to put out forest fires and fill sandbags. That's why the Liberals are erasing Canada's history and identity. Canadians are waking up to this, which is why we saw an outpouring of opposition to the latest Liberal plan to make the military look foolish. On Friday, the Canadian Army revealed its new branding logo. This pixelated image is supposed to invoke the digital camouflage design worn by our soldiers. That's not what most people saw when they looked at it. Let me know what you think it depicts in the comments below. It's just the latest example of the Liberals turning our military into something unrecognizable. Last night, the House of Commons was debating the NDP Liberal plan to have the federal government control life-saving medications. The NDP Liberal plan is to phase out private prescription drug plans in favor of a drug plan controlled by socialist politicians. The NDP Liberal takeover is starting with birth control and medicine for diabetics. It was only a few months ago that Canada saw a shortage of Ozempic, a drug originally developed for controlling diabetes. Should Canada be faced with another shortage, how will the government decide who receives the life-saving drugs and who must wait? I put that question to the Liberals yesterday and they had no response. Take a look.
Comments? The honourable member for Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Not too long ago, in fact, it was the beginning of this year, there was a shortage of Ozempic, which is a medication that diabetics take. Now, for some diabetics, this was the only type of medication that would help them with their particular condition. So there was a shortage, and there was not enough to go around. With the government in charge of deciding who will get this, who would get life-saving medication in the event of another shortage, because there will be one. How is it that the government will decide who lives and who dies?
The honourable member, Parliamentary Secretary, the Government House Leader.
Well, Madam Speaker, look at the option of the Conservative Party and what the Conservative Party would be saying. They'd be saying, don't come to us, we don't care. We don't care. Go to the province. Go to anywhere else, but don't come to Ottawa. Because the Conservative Party does not believe that Ottawa plays a role when it comes to the health and well-being of Canadians, Madam Speaker. Right. If this debate that we were having today was on the Canada Health Act, this Conservative leader, Madam Speaker, and the Conservative members of Parliament would be instructed by the leader to vote against it, Madam Speaker. They do not believe in yes, it is true. That's what we are not order.
It is clear the Liberals do not want to tell Canadians the truth about what will happen during a drug shortage. During the debate, I also asked the Liberals if they would balance all the funding for contraception and the morning after pills with funding for in vitro fertilization. In response, the Liberals said that support for in vitro fertilization was shameful. Take a look.
The honourable member for Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke.
Mr. Speaker, the member opposite opened up his speech by talking about the morning after pill. I'm wondering if he knows that in his province of Ontario that is already covered. And with respect to all the money that is going into protecting women from going full-term in pregnancy, I'm wondering, would the government instead or in addition at some point choose to direct the funding towards in vitro fertilization? Our birth rate in Canada is lamentingly low. Rather than focusing on wiping out or tapering off the population, would they consider helping women to have babies?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, that is a shameful display of the type of anti-choice rhetoric that happens in this House far too often with Conservatives.
The NDP Liberals' radical far-left ideology leads them to attack in vitro fertilization. They are out of touch with what Canadians want from the federal government. It's time to return some common sense to Parliament Hill. Last week, much of the legacy media were debating whether or not it's polite to call the Prime Minister a wacko for not immediately ending his failed experiment with hard drugs in British Columbia. The NDP government in BC had asked the Prime Minister to amend the special federal order which made it legal to possess 2.5 grams of any hard drug. The BC NDP wanted to ban the use of hard drugs in public places. This came after reports of people smoking crack and meth in hospitals. When Pierre asked Trudeau when he would amend the special order and ban drug use in public places, Trudeau ignored the question and called the leader of His Majesty's loyal opposition a racist. Whenever Trudeau's caught, he always resorts to calling people racists. Many in the legacy media tried to claim that calling somebody a wacko is just as bad, if not worse, than calling someone a racist, white supremacist. It was just another example of the legacy media more concerned with the words spoken by the opposition rather than the actions taken by the federal government. This is how the legacy media turn what should be a national debate on drug policy into a political high school popularity contest. But even the CBC has been unable to ignore the mounting evidence that Trudeau's other signature drug policy, free drugs for people suffering from addiction, is having a harmful effect on Canadians. Yet not a single Canadian mainstream news outlet bothered to report on the biggest development in the story of the worsening drug crisis in North America. Last month, a bipartisan U.S. congressional committee released an explosive report detailing how the communists who control China have actively pursued a policy of dumping fentanyl into the United States and Canada. Communist-controlled companies are exporting the chemicals required to produce fentanyl to Mexican drug cartels. Not only are these companies state-owned, but they also receive tax breaks and financial grants from national, state, and local governments. Some of these companies are even selling fentanyl online. The communists who control China maintain the largest online surveillance system in the world. Any attempts to sell fentanyl online to people living in China is shut down, while international sales are encouraged and rewarded. The communists are using Chinese companies to produce and export fentanyl, while they use China's gangsters to distribute the drugs in North America. The gangsters, in turn, corrupt our companies and use them for money laundering. Just last week, the Wall Street Journal reported that TD Canada Trust was allegedly used by these gangsters to launder over $600 million. Employees were bribed, and a TD Bank spokesperson said, quote, "Regrettably, our U.S. anti-money laundering program did not effectively thwart these activities," end quote. The communists who control China are attacking on multiple fronts. They're flooding our country with fentanyl, while Trudeau's program of legalization only makes the communist jobs easier. After 9 years of NDP Liberal government, it's time to stop the crime perpetrated by the communists who control China. Live from Ottawa, this is Cheryl Gallant.